All right. Peace and love, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new, please like and subscribe. And welcome everyone on this Wednesday evening. I'm so excited tonight's topic and tonight's guest. And Family of Light, we're going to be exploring a hidden chapter in our glorious history of the American struggle. We know many things are coming to the light now and are being exposed. There's so much more to the American history and the history of the Americas that is coming to light now that has been hidden or suppressed for a long time. So tonight we're talking about some of that history and the proud legacy of the Seminole people with my wonderful guest. We call everybody King and Queen on the show. So King Thomas Mitchell of the Seminole Freemen Foundation. I'm so excited to have you on the show and to get to see you in person. I know we've been talking a lot over the last few months, so finally get to see your face and everything. So peace and love. How
Thank
are
you.
you?
Oh, I'm well, thank you. I'm honored to be here with you today, and
Thank you.
I look forward to us, just going over a few things that explains my purpose and organizational purpose here in Florida with the Seminole Freemen Foundation.
Thank you. Thank you. So, can you share a little bit about yourself with our listening audience for those who may not know you?
Okay, well, um, I was born actually in Washington, D.C., in the Freemen's Hospital, which is now the Howard University Hospital up there. And I have worked in Washington, D.C. for the majority of my life. Um, I was working for the last 25 years with the Sewell Music Conservatory on Kennedy Street there and the Capitol Music and Arts Institute.
Mhm.
And we've since opened our doors to the community in DC, and we founded the organization NCBAI, the National Congress of Black American Indians, uh,
Mhm.
as a meeting place within the Sewell Music Conservatory uh, complex, and as an umbrella organization for many of the uh, community based organizations out of Washington, D.C. My mom's family is from Florida, and their community of Hyde Park and the farmer family in
Mhm.
Florida was really where I started my research, family genealogy, and I always had a deep sense of, after having moved to Tallahassee, Florida, with my parents when I was a teenager. We moved on our ancestral homelands, our family lands that my grandmother and grandfather were still alive but aging. And they emphasized to me back then in the late 70s that the land we lived on had never been owned or occupied by anyone. No
Mhm.
white people ever owned that, and
Mhm.
that it was of the utmost importance for them to let my mother know that, to let me as a child know that, and my father. And we've been living on those lands in Florida ever since my mother passed recently, or back 3 or 4 years ago.
Mhm.
And I'm now living in Florida trying to do some restorative justice projects. Most of the land is surrounded by the National Forest or the Fish and Wildlife Refuge, which abuts right up to our properties. And we have certain aspects of that property which we are now trying to put in we're just reclaiming it as ancestral homelands of the Seminole,
Mhm.
first Seminole Wars, and the Negro Fort is near our property, near our land. Well, it's on the Apalachicola River, and our land sits on the Wakulla River, which were natural boundaries
Mhm.
back during the War of 1812 in Florida, when it was British West Florida, and my family
Yes.
was already living on that property. Okay, so
Oh wow.
that's a
You
quick
have a
synopsis.
a long history on that part of Florida. That's the Panhandle region, right?
Correct. Yes.
Right. Yes, I'm familiar with Color
Mm.
River, and since I met you, I've learned what Apalachicola is. So, tell us a little bit about. Thank you for sharing that. There is a
Hmm.
lot of misinformation and confusion out there. So, can you please tell us who are the Seminoles? Who are the Seminoles? Because it's just you hear all
Okay.
kinds of things, and there's a lot of conflict and confusion. So based on your with your studies and everything, and this is your family lineage. So
Mm.
tell us, who are the Seminoles?
Well, the Seminoles are a collective band of tribes that came
Mm-hmm.
originally. They've been in Florida and they first started unilaterally uh, working with the Spanish who came into Florida, and they also allied later with the British who eventually came into Florida and the French,
Mm-hmm.
the Choctaw and other tribes that all came together in Florida around the turn of the 1800s, at the beginning of the 19th century, in that first decade. They were all collectively gathered together, and they actually came together, um, and they started a confederation of tribes, which became first the Muskogee Creek tribes, then it
Mm-hmm.
expanded to the Yamasee and other tribes that all came and formed a nation, the Seminole Nation. And these multi tribes first started dealing with the Europeans who were
Mm-hmm.
living in North America east of the Appalachian Mountains, Appalachia.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have any land, they didn't have anything to do west of the Appalachian Mountains at the time the Seminole Nation formed. And they formed also under the Great Law of Peace.
Mm-hmm.
They a confederacy that was followed up by the Great Iroquois laws, and they
Okay.
had Tecumseh come from the north down to Alabama and meet with the
Mm-hmm.
tribes. And that's where the Confederation, the Seminole Nation, became a national group that resisted westward movement of
Mm.
the 13 original United States.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. That was
Mm-hmm.
real informative. Now, are the Seminole tribes isolated to the state of Florida? Because I know there is talk of presence of them in some other southern states.
Well, no, they're actually they come as far west as New Orleans, coming in from
Mm-hmm.
Alabama, Mississippi, all the way through. Each of these tribal nations became part of the uh, early, or let's say the late 1790s. They started forming this confederation, and they decided that they needed a diplomatic embassy, an approach to dealing with the Europeans. And
Mm-hmm.
what came from the Muskogee Creeks, they had a maritime navy that actually started commandeering Spanish vessels and French vessels and becoming known as pirates under William
Mm-hmm.
Augustus Bowles.
Okay.
And they took a contingency on a stolen Spanish ship back to England and handed the ship over to the English and started then doing diplomatic correspondence with the Seminole tribe, the Cherokees, and they actually found they were called the United Nation of Cherokee and Creek. And
Mm-hmm.
then they developed more of a tribal community with the Choctaw, with the other tribes that were in that area. And let me just say that at this point, at at the end of the 1790s, Florida was still considered a black kingdom. the
Mm.
chiefs were black.
Well, say that again. It
Palatucci.
was because it's breaking up
Florida
a
was
little.
still considered, yes, Florida was still considered a black kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And the chiefs who ran that kingdom were people of color. They were not the Asiatic brand of.
Oh, we lost him. Bear with us, family. We're having some technical difficulties. You know how the tech gremlins, they always around. Just bear with us a moment, and Mr. Mitchell should sign back in, and we can continue this interesting topic about the Seminole legacy and history. And with Mr. Thomas Mitchell, who is the founder of the Seminole Freemen Foundation. And just bear with me. We should be back. All right, we are still waiting. Hopefully, he will sign back in. Let's take another brief 30-second break. All right, and we are back. I just played a little short music break. And the gremlins, you know, they always up to no good, so we got you back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Yes.
you were saying at what time period Florida was a black kingdom, and what this was the 1700s, the
Well,
1600s.
I would say, yeah, at the beginning of the 19th century, the 1800s,
Mm-hmm.
Florida was the tribal community were people of color,
Mm-hmm.
and they had been given the name dealing with the Spanish. They started calling them the Seminoles, or some people say Cimarron was what the Spanish
Mm-hmm.
connotation to the name was. But what it was that these early Spaniards who came into even where my family's from in the St. Marks, Wakulla County area, they came as early as 1524, and they had to deal with the tribal leadership in a way that they diplomatically negotiated their staying in tribal lands. Usually it came through the matrimony of, a tribal chieftain's daughter, or through the female matriarch of the tribe. And
Right.
they started calling any mixed person of it could be Spanish and black, Spanish and native, but they were all considered mulattoes,
Mm-hmm.
mestizo, and others in Florida. My family still has that. The Farmer family, which my mother's maiden name was Farmer, they were
Mm-hmm.
literally the first farmers in Florida, because farmer wasn't a name used by the Spanish. They had haciendas, they had
Yes.
rancheros, and they raised cattle, they raised hogs, or and most of those were trade animals with the tribes. They
Mm-hmm.
trade, and or they traded them from the tribes. Our history gets a little skewed, and they make it sound like, oh, they brought the horses here and they brought the
Yes.
hogs here from Europe, but a lot of these feral animals were controlled by the native tribes in Florida, cattle and these things. And so as the English came down, they brought the name farmer and these things, trying to civilize the tribes and turning them into farmers.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of the First Seminole War, somehow my family had adopted the name and become known as farmers in the county, but they were still living on, dependent on the fishing village. We on the Gulf of Mexico, we live right on the Gulf. And the settler who came from the north, from Georgia, coming into Florida, were trying to expand that border all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, making Georgia reach the Gulf of Mexico. And the resistance of the Seminole tribes there were not to let them come in and not let them introduce the plantocracy system as they practice in Georgia, in Florida. They resisted slavery from the beginning. They did not think that was part of it, but somehow the political spin made other tribes think that you were civilized if you owned slaves. And that just wasn't having it in Florida. We were free people, and we owned our own lands. We hunted and fished and did our own type of propagation of community, social gatherings. Even the blacks who ran away from the state of Georgia, who came into Florida, once they came into the tribe, once they married into the tribe, they were given tracts of lands where they could raise corn, and they could process other crops that they were more familiar with, outside of where the nucleus of the tribal community lived. And so I have been working with the organization that we founded, the Seminole Freemen Foundation, along with Dr. Tenney, Dr. Wallace Tenney in Miami. And we have been doing things that, okay, I'm sorry,
maybe if you could maybe move near the router. Are you able to move like closer to your router? Sometimes that helps. Let's try that.
You're okay. Hopefully this will be better.
Yeah, let's try again. You were saying something about Dr.
Yeah, Dr. Tenney and her organization has been working with us, bringing to light the Seminole Maroon communities in South Florida, from Tampa, where there was the Angola community that many of the refugees who left the Negro fort went down by the 1830s, the late 1820s, and formed and more settlements there. And they also founded villages like Chai Chi villages and others, where the black leadership of the tribe controlled it. These men like Sam Jones, Alligator, Jumper, and also chiefs such as Micanopy, all worked together with the black tribesmen such as John Horse, Abraham, and those who were really the war chiefs. They headed up the war clans, and they resisted for more than 40 years in Florida, from maybe, let's say, 1818 until 1858. They resisted the U.S. government trying to remove them from the land. And that started all the way back with Andrew Jackson and the Indian Removal Act. So the forces got to be larger, and these villages were 2,000 to 3,000 people in some places.
Okay. All right. Now, share with us um, a little about why the Seminole Freemen are often misrepresented or not included in history.
Well, the simple fact is that we capitulated. We never were defeated here in Florida. We
Mm-hmm.
maintained that we negotiated with General Jessup, and we negotiated with actually 2 U.S. presidents who formerly became presidents, and they were military leaders in the Seminole Wars, and we never had to surrender to them. We're unconquered people here in Florida, but we've had to deal with the institutional racism that came from the U.S. government, and segregation, Jim Crow, and all the other things to continue to declassify us as indigenous people, as native people to Florida or to America. And it's always been a disenfranchisement effort through institutional racism to divide us and to take our land. And, it's been whittled away over the centuries. And so one of the things that the Seminole Freemen Foundation is looking forward to doing is a reclamation program. We want to reclaim our ancestral lands, our ancestral homelands, before we were removed out to Oklahoma and Texas, removed to Michigan, Ohio, and other states where we still celebrate our family reunions and things like that, because we do have this long-term connection from our Florida clan and our Florida tribal families that now have gone and moved throughout America. They're in every urban city in every corner of the world. I mean, of the United States, but as well as we're represented in the islands of the Caribbean, Trinidad, the Bahamas. We can go even into Central and South America with a lot of the early Garifuna Maroon communities and others are all interrelated to what started right in Florida, and when the first Seminole War battles began at the Negro Fort around 1816, 1817.
Okay. All right. That's amazing. Can
Thank
you
you.
tell us a little? Can you tell us a little bit more about because I love hearing you talk about the resistance movements in the southeastern United States, including the Seminoles and the Maroons in that area. So the resistance movements and some of the leaders of those movements you shared with me. Can you share just a little bit with us about that?
Yes. Well, the resistance movement actually becomes intertwined with also the Underground Railroad Network to Freedom, the Saltwater Underground Network to Freedom, which allowed many of the Seminoles living in Florida to relocate into the Bahamas and into Trinidad. And they were all connected to Royal British Marines, which was how they formed these company towns and things like that. But in Florida, we resisted by stealthy anonymity. We could not, and it's a number of things. In Florida, and especially in the Panhandle, I realized a lot of my relatives have spent their lives having to have a duplistic personality, having to deal and work with segregation throughout the lifetime. And many of that effect is still within our community, within our broken families, within the things that we have to really, really work on trying to rehabilitate our psychology on how we treat one another and how we behave, because it's been so damaged by 2 centuries, 3 centuries of forced institutional racism in the South, in our areas, miseducation about our heritage and who we are, where we come from. Right now, I'm working within the U.S. Forestry Service, but they still have they are very resistant to list the Black leadership that were developing in these Black settlements in northern Florida, in the Panhandle, during the First and Second Seminole Wars. They have tried to use paper genocide to remove us from the records and from our books. But we then find that when we go back and find our family bloodlines, that we can see that, we've changed and domesticated our names. Some are Jacksons, some are, Hawkins, Hargrets, and others that live that are in my family community that have changed their names somewhere down the line as they recategorized us as Negro, African American, and otherwise. We've had to, disregard our Seminole heritage. And now in the 21st century, we hope that we can find a way to reconnect all of our people who have gone throughout the Seminole diaspora to Florida and let them understand that, we are still essentially the indigenous people of this Southeast. And it's crucial that we start demanding that recognition and understanding that we're the hosts here. We've been invaded by folks who really don't ever recognize they have this arrogance about them that they don't think that this land belonged to anyone but them. And that's not true.
Yes. Thank you. Can you share with us a little bit more about the history of those indigenous Black towns in the states of places like Florida and Texas and other parts of the Southeast? I know you mentioned to me the Seminoles founded a lot of those historical towns and historical forts. And
John Horse in particular, yes, is one of the people that I was mentioning earlier. John Horse was born in Florida. He went out to Oklahoma, founded the town of Wewoka, Oklahoma. He was then found that they were still selling slaves in Oklahoma and treating the Black people there. So he took over 1,000 Black Seminoles along with Wildcat and his tribe, and they went into Texas. They went all the way into Mexico and got a grant from the Mexican government to be protectors of the northern border of Mexico in the town of Nacimiento in Eagle Pass in that area. And so John Horse is a very important person. Sam Jones is a Florida person, and also John Hicks. Hickstown was right in Madison County, and they were all these other, our community of Hyde Park, where my mother's family, the farmers, are from. Hyde Park are direct descendants out of the Apalachicola destruction of the farmlands and settlements along that river. And we're just trying to get as much of this back, as well as we want to do a reconciliation program that will also go along with the reclamation of our ancestral homelands. But the reconciliation component is for us to reconcile with those Miccosukee and other tribal Seminoles first, who are in Florida, who are now, they have all the casinos and all the money, but they don't want to include the, let's say, the Black family of Seminoles into the tribe. And we're just trying to get all of that organized here in Florida. And hopefully we can remove some of the doubt that people will have, because there's monies involved and there's time spent in segregating us from the tribe, and that a lot of that comes back from the Oklahoma Western tribes into South Florida, and they neglect the Blacks who are in the tribe here in Tallahassee and in the North Florida region.
Mm-hmm.
and disconnect us. And we have to be re-educated through the, HBCU schools, Florida A&M and others. And then we grab, the fact that we're now modern African Americans, but our indigenous heritage is so important and so important to us in Florida, because many of us have always been in Florida.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. All right.
Mm.
Um, I know you were telling me something about the Black Fort, the Negro Fort too. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, the Negro Fort is really something that is near and dear to me, and
Mm-hmm.
we have been. It kind of came to me like back in the early '80s. I heard word about this urban myth or legend of a place known as the Negro Fort, and that there was a Black resistance movement. We now know where this fort is. We now
Mm-hmm.
know that the Blacks, Seminoles, and other native tribes all gathered there and were armed with cannons and weapons. And it was not just a fort, it was a settlement of over 3,000 Black and Native people living along the Apalachicola River, raising farms and having a productive, nonviolent, peaceful life. And
Mm-hmm.
then we have invaders coming from Georgia and Tennessee, Andrew Jackson, and they come in and they destroy this settlement.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a massacre there where there's a mass burial ground of over 250 lives inside this fort, but of 3,000 people, many of them were able to.
Oh no! Again, bear with me, fam. This conversation is needs to be had, so just bear with me. We're still having technical issues. All right, and we are back. Perfect. All right. And
Okay,
all right, you were talking about the settlements in and around the Negro Fort, which was in which county again?
that would be on the Apalachicola River.
Okay.
It's actually in between two counties. One of them is known as uh, Liberty County,
Mm-hmm.
and also they listed as Franklin County, which the town of Apalachicola, we're putting a museum up right now, and we're dedicating a certain portion of the exhibit
Mm-hmm.
to the settlement at the Negro Fort, and to make this a national site that should have. It's already on the National Historic Registry, but somehow
Right.
through the different federal agencies, they have been keeping this location under wraps.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't been allowing the public to really get out there. And so my organization, the Friends of Negro Fort, the Negro Fort Foundation and Education Trust have all got together with the North Florida African American History and Culture. I'm sorry, History Corridor and other organizations in the panhandle of Florida have gotten together to try to get the Negro Fort open as an everyday visitor site and to put certain new commemoration memorials out there at the mass burial grounds and other things. It's kind of like Florida's dirty little laundry history that they want to keep closed. And we're working to get it open.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, because it's so much of the history that has been suppressed and covered up, and it needs it. It's the more we're learning and discovering, and the more people study their genealogy, the more that they'll find.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And what we hope to have is a genealogy center inside the museum that will take us back to the War of 1812 and registered free Negroes who were part of the Royal British Marines and their families. And these records we're now getting out of King's College in Great Britain and the military colleges in Britain.
That's wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
Who do you know who were some of the founders of those early towns along the Apalachicola? Some of the people you mentioned, like John Horse, John Hicks, and some others, were they founders
Well,
of the
John
town?
Horse John Horse was a child at the time, but he was at the Negro Fort. But there were leaders like John Hicks, also Abraham. Abraham was a powerful leader who came out of the Negro Fort. The white history lists him as a slave, but he was never a slave. Even after the Battle of Negro Fort, he had come out of Pensacola, and he was quite a skilled seafarer and a Royal British Marine enlistee. And many of them, men like Tommy Perriman, who were chiefs, up the Flint River, just at the Florida-Georgia border. Palatucci, the Black King, his village was one of the larger villages right at the confluence of the Apalachicola River and the Flint River. And his band he had almost 2,000 followers as part of the warrior class and following him out of the Negro Fort. So it's a lot of people that did come. And like I said, they weren't trying to just sit there and be warriors. They were trying to raise their families and keep an economic trade as their forefront living there. They traded furs, they traded corn, they traded all the other things that really the Europeans didn't have and needed more so than what we were trading with them for.
Okay. Makes sense. Yes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. And all of that will be included in that museum that they're building?
Yes. Well, most of it, majority of it. We're going to tell the story of the Muskogee Creeks and the 1789 treaty that
It's freezing again. Can you hear us, Mr. Mitchell? Oh boy. Well, it's freezing again. Bam. And I think we're gonna bear with us one more time. I know this may be getting frustrating for you viewers. It's just something that happens sometimes with the internet. Well, so just bear with us, please. All right, and we are back. One more question, I think. All right, you're on mute. You can unmute.
I'm clear now. Yeah.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can. We can hear you just fine now.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't even remember what we were talking about before we got disconnected. I think the museum.
Go ahead.
I think we were talking about the museum, right?
Yeah, we were talking about the museum and what's in store there. The museum is going to be in Appalachia, the town of Apalachicola. It's a 2,500 square foot museum, and we're building it from the ground up. Just broke the ground within the last 60 days. And yeah, and we expect it to be completed by 2026, actually by the end of 2025. So in the meantime, though, it will house a number of things. The people of Apalachicola, the community there. Now, our history has been somewhat hidden from us in Florida. Most of the people who live there never heard of Prospect Bluff and the Negro Fort until the last 4 or 5 years, 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
And that history was, I'm just going to say, blatantly hidden from the community. And so we have the task now of making it and making annual events there and trying to get it risen up so that it can have a national memorial presence. And it can also serve as a healing space for where these atrocities that took place on us, you know, the mass graveyard and burial grounds there have a story to tell. And we want to be able to have interpretive centers and sites that tell the truth, not tell the story of this antebellum Fort Gadsden that was existed for the Confederate Army. That has no place there. That's not the relevant history. So we're trying to get all that changed and brought into a modern 21st century perspective with the U.S. Forestry Service and the National Park Service.
That's good. That's good. So, so some of the descendants of the Seminole Freemen, such as yourself and others, what are they doing now? Besides, I know you all are working on the museum, but to support their ancestral legacy and the preservation, and how also at the end can you share your contact information, how people can reach you and the Seminole Freemen Foundation?
Okay, well, let's just say that many of us some of us have gone and excelled in academics in the area of Florida A&M University, and I'm just saying that the awareness to our Seminole heritage has been reprogrammed away from us and out of us so that we can take on this African American culture of the modern American society. And we're trying to get more traditional projects and programs so that those people can know their true ancestry. About it, you know, we've been assimilated, and we're still forcing ourselves to assimilate into the culture of the American people, the United States, and it hasn't worked for us. So yeah, and I'll tell you, I can get you more information about our projects and things that are going on. I look forward to sharing. And like I said, it's the struggle right now is unifying our people and educating our people to know this information.
Yes, absolutely.
Because they don't understand, and they buy into the slave, let's say the slave narrative that was
Mm-hmm.
presented to us by Alex Haley. You
Mm.
see, that narrative doesn't apply to the Seminole, the Maroon communities, because we resisted and never went into uh, slavery. We were exiled before put into slavery.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Okay. How can our listening audience, if someone wants to contact you, maybe to get involved with the land reclamation process, or to help with developing the museum or whatever, how can they get in contact with you? Can you share with your Facebook page? And do you have a website for the Seminole Freeman
Uh,
Foundation?
not at this time, but you certainly go to the Negro Fort 2015 at gmail.com and
Okay,
send
let
me
me
some
put that
email.
in. Negro Fort, say it again.
Negro Fort 2015
Hmm.
at gmail.com. You can go to Facebook and look up also Negro Fort, the Negro Fort Foundation on Facebook, or you can just look up Thomas Mitchell on
Okay.
Facebook at Facebook.
Okay. All righty. I'll do that. Okay, then. Well, thank
Thank
you
you.
for joining us. It's been a supreme pleasure to have you and to have you share this information and this history, and this is knowledge about the resistance, because oftentimes all that many of us know or hear about our history is the slave narrative, and you don't hear enough about or anything about the resistance, and that there were actually people who were free and who had thriving communities. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing this with us. And may you be blessed and strengthened as you continue to work that you're doing with the Seminole Freeman Foundation.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I look forward to having you on again, maybe on some panel discussions and some more talk. So
All right.
that'll be awesome.
Thank you
And
so much, and peace to
thank
you
you.
and to your
Peace to
audience.
you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Good night, everyone, and have a blessed evening. Peace and love.
Peace.